I never thought that owning a piece of land would lead to the fight of my life. For years, I had cherished the peaceful solitude of my property on the outskirts of the city. The land passed down through my family for generations represented more than just a home. It was my sanctuary. That sense of peace was shattered the day I returned from a weekend trip to find a crew of construction workers drilling into my backyard. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Pulling into my driveway, I noticed the heavy machinery, trucks emblazoned with the logo of some construction company I'd never heard of, and a swarm of workers carving a deep trench across my property. Stunned, I approached the nearest worker and demanded an explanation. "We're installing a gas pipeline," the man said nonchalantly, barely looking up from his clipboard. "On my land, without my permission?" My voice rose and several workers stopped what they were doing to glance in my direction. The man shrugged. "We have the green light from the homeowner association. You'll have to take it up with them." My blood boiled. The homeowner association. For years, they had been a thorn in my side, constantly introducing new fees and regulations that bordered on absurdity. But this was a whole new level. I stormed into my house, determined to call the association president, Mr. Whitmore, only to find a letter taped to my front door. The letter claimed the pipeline was part of a community improvement project and that the homeowner association had secured the necessary approvals to proceed. Nowhere in the letter was there any mention of my consent. Furious, I dialed Mr. Whitmore's number. "Alex," he said smoothly after letting my call ring far too many times. "I've been expecting your call." "What the hell is going on, Whitmore? You've got workers tearing up my land without my permission." "Calm down," he replied, his voice dripping with condescension. "This pipeline is for the benefit of the entire community. As a member of the homeowner association, you're obligated to support such projects." "Support?" I nearly shouted. "You didn't even ask me. You can't just march onto my property and start drilling." Whitmore's tone turned icy. "Actually, we can. You'd better read the fine print of your homeowner association agreement. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other matters to attend to." He hung up before I could respond. Over the next few days, the situation escalated. I tried reasoning with the construction foreman, but he claimed his hands were tied. Calls to the homeowner association office were met with curt responses or outright dismissal. My frustration mounted as the trench grew deeper and the massive pipeline began to take shape. Then Karen arrived. A self-proclaimed community advocate and Whitmore's staunchest ally, Karen was infamous for meddling in everyone's business. She showed up uninvited, her pastel cardigan and ever-present clipboard, practically screaming, "Homeowner Association Enforcer." "Alex," she began, her tone dripping with faux concern, "I heard you've been causing quite a stir about the pipeline." "Damn right I have," I snapped. "This is my land, Karen. They're trespassing." Karen's smile didn't falter. "Oh, Alex, you're being so dramatic. This is for the good of the community. Surely you can see that. I see a blatant violation of my property rights." Her eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you should reconsider your stance. You wouldn't want to alienate yourself from your neighbors, would you?" "Was that a threat?" I asked, stepping closer. "Of course not," she said, backing away slightly. "Just a friendly piece of advice." She left soon after, but her words lingered, a veiled warning that more trouble was coming. I decided enough was enough. If the homeowner association wouldn't respect my property, I'd make them. Early one morning, before the construction crew arrived, I parked my truck across the trench, blocking their access. When the workers showed up, they milled about uncertainly before calling their supervisor. It didn't take long for Whitmore to arrive, flanked by Karen and two police officers. The sight of them striding up my driveway made my stomach churn, but I stood my ground. "Move the truck, Alex," Whitmore ordered, his voice devoid of any pretense of civility. "Not until you stop this illegal construction," I shot back. Whitmore exchanged a glance with one of the officers, who stepped forward. "Sir, if you don't move your vehicle, we'll have to tow it." "On whose authority, not?" I demanded. "The homeowner association has filed a complaint," the officer replied. "We're here to ensure the peace." I laughed bitterly. "Peace? They're destroying my land. Where's my protection?" The officer looked uncomfortable but didn't respond. Karen, however, was all too happy to chime in. "Alex, why must you make this so difficult?" she asked, her voice saccharine sweet. "Just think of the community." "You mean think of you and Whitmore?" I retorted. "You're not fooling anyone, Karen." The confrontation ended with my truck being towed, but not before I captured the entire scene on video. If they wanted a fight, I was ready to give them one. That evening, I uploaded the video to social media, detailing the homeowner association's overreach and the illegal construction on my property. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in from people who had faced similar abuses from their own associations. However, not all the feedback was positive. By the next morning, my mailbox was stuffed with anonymous notes accusing me of being selfish and uncooperative. Graffiti defaced my fence reading, "Sell and leave." My once friendly neighbors now glared at me as I walked by. Karen's smear campaign was in full swing, but I refused to back down. I hired a lawyer and began gathering evidence to file a lawsuit against the homeowner association. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I had no choice. This was my land, my home, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me. The stage was set for a battle that would test every ounce of my resolve. The homeowner association, Karen, and their allies had declared war on me, but they underestimated my determination. Little did they know I had just uncovered the first piece of a much larger conspiracy, one that would shake the entire community to its core. The days that followed felt like living in a pressure cooker. Every morning, I awoke to find new signs of hostility, garbage dumped on my driveway, threatening notes tucked under my door, and even a suspicious flat tire on my truck. The homeowner association had rallied a portion of the community against me, thanks to Karen's relentless gossip campaign. I couldn't leave my house without enduring glares or hushed whispers from neighbors who used to greet me with smiles. Determined not to let them intimidate me, I focused on gathering evidence for my case. My lawyer, Jessica Reed, was sharp and unrelenting, and she quickly identified a glaring flaw in the homeowner association's actions. They had no legal documentation granting them permission to install the gas pipeline on my land. Armed with this information, we filed an injunction to halt construction immediately. The homeowner association, however, wasn't about to back down. 2 days after filing, I returned home to find a new development, a towering metal fence erected along the boundary of my property, cutting off access to the pipeline trench. A sign read, "Private property, authorized personnel only." It was their way of doubling down on their claim. I called Jessica in a rage. "Can they do this?" I demanded, pacing back and forth. "Not legally," she replied. "This is a blatant attempt to intimidate you. I'll file for its removal, but it could take time." Unable to access parts of my own land, I decided to fight fire with fire. Late one night, armed with a flashlight and my phone's camera, I crept out to document the trench and the pipeline. As I approached, I heard voices. Ducking behind a tree, I saw Whitmore and Karen standing near the trench, speaking in hushed tones. My heart raced as I hit record. "The pipeline has to be finished by next week," Whitmore was saying. "We've already invested too much to let this guy ruin it." "Don't worry," Karen replied. "I'll keep the neighbors on our side. He'll crack under the pressure soon enough." The conversation confirmed my suspicions. This was bigger than a simple pipeline. The homeowner association and their allies were financially invested in the project, and they were willing to steamroll anyone who stood in their way. Armed with this recording, I felt a surge of hope. Finally, I had proof of their underhanded tactics. Jessica urged me to present the recording at the next homeowner association meeting, scheduled for that Friday evening. Despite the hostility, I stood before the crowd, my heart pounding as I played the recording. The room fell silent as Whitmore's and Karen's voices echoed through the speakers. "This is what your leaders are doing," I said, addressing the room. "They're using your fees to fund an illegal project and targeting me to cover it up." For a moment, there was nothing but stunned silence. Then chaos erupted. Some members of the crowd began shouting at Whitmore, demanding answers. Others turned their anger on me, accusing me of fabricating the recording. Karen stood up, her face flushed with anger. "This is a desperate attempt to sabotage a community project," she yelled. "Alex has always been difficult. He doesn't care about the greater good." Before I could respond, Whitmore called for order, his face a mask of cold fury. "This meeting is adjourned," he declared. "We'll address these baseless accusations through the proper channels." The next morning, I woke to find my property vandalized again. The graffiti this time was unmistakable. "Traitor" sprayed in bright red across my garage door. Furious, I called the police, but the officer who arrived seemed reluctant to help. "It's probably just some kids," he said, shrugging. "Not much we can do without witnesses." "Kids don't know the details of a homeowner association meeting," I shot back. "This is targeted harassment." He promised to file a report but offered little reassurance. It was clear that the homeowner association's influence extended beyond just my neighborhood. Determined to expose the full scope of their corruption, I spent hours combing through public records and property deeds. Jessica and I discovered a series of questionable transactions between the homeowner association and a shadowy construction firm, Eagle Ridge Developments. The company had ties to several city officials, explaining how they'd managed to secure permits so quickly. This isn't just about the pipeline, Jessica said grimly. They're planning a massive redevelopment project. Your property is the last obstacle in their way. The revelation sent a chill down my spine. My fight was no longer just about protecting my land. It was about exposing a conspiracy that threatened the entire community. As I prepared for the next phase of my battle, I knew the stakes were higher than ever. The homeowner association, Karen, and their powerful allies were willing to go to any lengths to achieve their goals. But so was I. With the evidence in hand and a growing sense of resolve, I was ready to take the fight to the next level. The days following the discovery of the homeowner association's larger scheme felt like a race against time. Every hour seemed to bring a new escalation from their side. The fence remained, cutting off parts of my land, and the graffiti on my garage door served as a daily reminder of their hostility. Despite this, I knew I had to press forward. Jessica and I prepared to file a lawsuit exposing the homeowner association's illegal actions. But just as we were finalizing the paperwork, a knock at my door shattered the relative quiet. Standing on my porch was a man in a dark suit, flanked by two burly men who looked more like bouncers than legal professionals. "Mr. Carter," the man said, extending a business card, "I represent Eagle Ridge Developments. We'd like to have a word." I crossed my arms, glaring at him. "I have nothing to say to you." The man smiled thinly. "That's unfortunate. We were hoping to avoid further complications." "Complications?" I shot back. "You mean like illegally drilling a pipeline through my land?" The smile vanished. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Mr. Carter. Sell your property to us at a generous price, and this can all be over." "Not a chance," I said firmly, stepping back to close the door. One of the burly men stepped forward, blocking the door with his hand. "Think it over," the man in the suit said, his tone now cold. "We'll be in touch." Jessica was furious when I told her about the encounter. "They're trying to intimidate you," she said, "but this could work in our favor. If we can prove they're using coercion, it'll strengthen our case." The next day, we filed the lawsuit. The Homeowner Association and Eagle Ridge Developments were named as defendants, and we sought an immediate injunction to halt all construction activities. The local news picked up the story, and soon reporters were calling for interviews. Public support started to shift in my favor as more people learned about the illegal pipeline and the bullying tactics. But the Homeowner Association wasn't done. 2 days after the lawsuit was filed, I woke up to find my electricity cut off. When I called the utility company, they claimed it was due to unpaid fees I knew I'd paid in full. It was a blatant attempt to make my life harder. Undeterred, I borrowed a generator from a friend and kept going. Each day felt like a battle, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me give up. One evening, as I reviewed documents in my home office, my phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. She'd uncovered new evidence linking Eagle Ridge Developments to bribes paid to city officials. The documents detailed how permits for the pipeline had been fast-tracked in exchange for hefty kickbacks. "This is it," Jessica said when I called her. "This could blow the case wide open." Before we could celebrate, however, the sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. I ran to my living room to find a brick lying on the floor amid shards of glass. Attached to it was a note: "Back off, or else." My hands trembled as I called the police. This time, they couldn't dismiss it as a prank. The officer who arrived took the note as evidence, but warned me to be careful. "These people clearly mean business," he said. Despite the threats, Jessica and I moved forward with our case. The evidence of bribery was a game changer, and we presented it in court during the preliminary hearing for the injunction. The judge's reaction was swift. All construction activities were to cease immediately, and an investigation into Eagle Ridge Developments and the Homeowner Association's finances was ordered. The ruling was a significant victory, but it only fueled the Homeowner Association's anger. Karen, ever the loyal enforcer, began spreading rumors that I had falsified the evidence. She even organized a neighborhood meeting to expose me, inviting anyone willing to listen to her lies. I decided to attend, armed with nothing but the truth. As Karen stood before the crowd, accusing me of sabotaging the community. I stepped forward. "Karen," I said, cutting through her tirade, "if you're so confident in your accusations, let's see your evidence. Because I have mine." I pulled out the documents Jessica had uncovered and handed copies to anyone who wanted to see them. The room fell silent as people read the damning details of the homeowner association's corruption. Karen's face turned pale, and for the first time she had no response. Whitmore, who had been sitting quietly in the back, stood up and left without a word. The tide was finally turning. The fight was far from over, but for the first time I felt like I had the upper hand. The homeowner association and Eagle Ridge Developments had underestimated me, and now their secrets were starting to unravel. But I knew they wouldn't go down without a fight. The next round was coming, and I needed to be ready. With the neighborhood meeting behind me, it felt like a small victory had been achieved. However, the fight was far from over. The homeowner association's silence in the following days was unnerving. Karen, usually loud and confrontational, had retreated into the shadows. Whitmore was nowhere to be seen. Jessica and I took this as a sign that they were regrouping, preparing for their next move. Meanwhile, the community's sentiment began shifting. Neighbors who had once avoided me now stopped by to ask questions about the evidence I had shared. Some even apologized for believing Karen's lies. It felt good to finally have support, but I knew better than to let my guard down. It wasn't long before the homeowner association struck back. One morning I awoke to find an official-looking letter on my doorstep. It was from a law firm representing the homeowner association, demanding that I cease all slanderous activities and retract my accusations. Failure to comply, the letter warned, would result in a defamation lawsuit. Jessica laughed when I showed her the letter. "This is a bluff," she said. "They're trying to scare you into backing off." "What if it's not?" I asked, the weight of the threat sinking in. "Then we'll fight it," she replied firmly. "They don't have a case, and we have the truth on our side." Her confidence was reassuring, but the constant pressure was taking its toll. The vandalism continued, albeit less overtly. A flat tire here, a broken mailbox there. It was clear the homeowner association wanted to keep me on edge. One evening, as I was reviewing court filings, there was a knock at my door. To my surprise, it was one of my neighbors, Mrs. Henderson. She was one of Karen's most vocal supporters, but now she looked uneasy. "I need to talk to you," she said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "It's about the homeowner association." I invited her in, and over the next hour she revealed what she knew. Whitmore had been holding secret meetings with Eagle Ridge Developments, promising lucrative deals to anyone who cooperated with their plans. Karen had been spreading lies to manipulate the neighborhood into compliance. Mrs. Henderson admitted she'd been pressured to side with them, but had grown increasingly uncomfortable with their tactics. Her confession was a turning point. With her testimony, we now had a key witness to back up our claims of corruption and coercion. Jessica wasted no time adding her statement to our case. The following week, the local news station aired an exposé on the homeowner association's corruption. They covered everything: the illegal pipeline, the bribes, and the harassment I had endured. The story included interviews with Jessica, Mrs. Henderson, and even a former employee of Eagle Ridge Developments who confirmed their shady dealings. The fallout was immediate. The homeowner association's leadership came under intense scrutiny. Whitmore and Karen refused to comment, but their silence spoke volumes. Eagle Ridge Developments issued a vague statement denying any wrongdoing, but the damage was done. As the court date approached, tensions reached a boiling point. The homeowner association's attorneys tried every trick in the book to delay proceedings, but Jessica was relentless. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Neighbors, reporters, and even city officials showed up to witness the culmination of the battle. Jessica presented our case with precision, laying out the evidence of bribery, coercion, and illegal construction. Mrs. Henderson's testimony was the final nail in the coffin. When Whitmore took the stand, his arrogance crumbled under cross-examination. Karen, too, was forced to admit to her role in spreading falsehoods. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. The homeowner association was ordered to cease all construction activities, dismantle the pipeline, and pay damages for their unlawful actions. Whitmore and Karen were removed from their positions, and an investigation into Eagle Ridge Developments was launched. Walking out of the courtroom that day, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The battle had taken its toll, but it was worth it. My land was safe, and justice had prevailed. Neighbors who once viewed me with suspicion now saw me as a defender of their rights. The homeowner association was left in shambles, their reputation irreparably damaged. Karen moved away soon after, unable to face the community she had betrayed. Whitmore disappeared from public view, his career in ruins. As for me, I finally had my peace back. The scars from the fight would remain, but so would the lessons. I had stood up against a system that tried to crush me, and I had won. And that, I realized, was worth everything. Though the immediate threat was gone, I couldn't help but wonder if this was truly the end. Corruption has a way of resurfacing, and vigilance would always be necessary. But for now, I could breathe easy, knowing that I had fought for what was right and come out on top. With the court victory behind me, I finally had the opportunity to breathe. The pipeline construction had stopped, and the dismantling process was underway. Workers removed the towering metal fence from my property, and the trench that had scarred my land was being filled. For the first time in months, my home felt like mine again. But the scars ran deeper than the land. The fight had changed me, and it had changed the neighborhood. Whitmore and Karen's departure left a power vacuum within the homeowner association, and neighbors began to question the organization's very purpose. Meetings were held and many residents pushed for its dissolution. Others argued for reform, vowing to ensure that such corruption could never happen again. As I attended these meetings, I saw a community trying to heal, but the divisions were still palpable. Some neighbors still avoided me, unwilling to admit they'd been complicit in the homeowner association schemes. Others, like Mrs. Henderson, became unexpected allies, working alongside me to rebuild trust and transparency. Just when I thought the ordeal was over, Jessica called me with startling news. During the investigation into Eagle Ridge developments, authorities had uncovered a cache of documents implicating not only the company, but also several high-ranking city officials. These papers detailed a broader conspiracy to exploit homeowners across multiple neighborhoods, using homeowner associations as a cover for illegal land grabs and development projects. "This is bigger than we thought," Jessica said. "Your case was just the tip of the iceberg." The revelation reignited my determination. While I had won my personal battle, there were others still suffering under similar schemes. I couldn't ignore it. At the urging of neighbors and activists, I joined a growing coalition of homeowners from across the city. Together, we formed a grassroots organization dedicated to holding corrupt homeowner associations and their partners accountable. The group quickly gained momentum, attracting media attention and support from other communities. My role in the coalition was both challenging and rewarding. I shared my story at town halls and public forums, using my experience to educate others about their rights. Jessica continued to provide legal expertise, helping to build cases against other homeowner associations that had abused their power. Months later, the investigation into Eagle Ridge developments culminated in a dramatic raid. News footage showed agents seizing files and computers from their offices, while city officials scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Several arrests were made, including a prominent city council member who had been one of Whitmore's strongest allies. The fallout sent shockwaves through the community. For many, it was a sobering reminder of how easily power could be abused. But for me, it was vindication. The people who had tried to destroy my life were finally being held accountable. In the end, the homeowner association in my neighborhood was disbanded. The community voted to create a new, transparent organization with limited powers, ensuring that no one would ever face what I had endured. The pipeline project was officially canceled, and Eagle Ridge Developments declared bankruptcy under the weight of lawsuits and fines. Karen's departure had been abrupt, and though no one seemed to know where she went, rumors swirled that she was trying to start over in another state. Whitmore, on the other hand, was facing multiple lawsuits and criminal charges. Justice had finally caught up to him. As for me, I returned to my life with a renewed sense of purpose. The fight had been exhausting, but it had also been transformative. I had stood up for what was right, not just for myself but for others, and I had won. My land was safe, and my community was on the path to healing. Looking back, I realized that the battle wasn't just about my property. It was about the principle that no one should have to face harassment and exploitation in their own home. The experience taught me the value of resilience and the importance of standing up against injustice, no matter how daunting the odds. Though the fight was over, I knew the lessons would stay with me forever. My land, my home, and my community were worth every struggle, And while I hoped never to face such a battle again, I knew I would be ready if the need ever arose.